Discover the incredible journey. How the Ice Age shaped 7 amazing traits that make us human. In the small Midwest town where days dragged like molasses, Luke, a 35-year-old janitor, stood hunched over the gleaming floors of the high school he'd never finished. The laughter of students once echoed through the halls, but now the only sounds were the squeak of his mop and the soft sighs of fading dreams. Every swipe of his mop was a reminder of unfinished ambitions, and the faded murals on the walls whispered secrets of a time when hope felt abundant. Luke's folks had raised him on grit and honesty, but the relentless grip of economic hardship was a ghost that haunted every corner of their small town. Each day blurred into the next as Luke swept the halls, burdened by the weight of his family's expectations and the fear of a future that seemed forever out of reach. With families struggling just to get by, the local diner lost its glow, serving more coffee than meals as folks huddled around tables discussing survival instead of dreams. Yet, in the depths of his existence, Luke held onto a flicker of hope though dim. It burned just bright enough to guide him through the gloom. One sweltering afternoon, in the midst of dusty storage rooms during renovations, Luke's life took an unexpected turn. Stumbling upon an ancient artifact, a spear point dating back to the Ice Age, his hands trembled with excitement and fear. This was no ordinary find. It was a link to a rich history that intertwined with the struggles of today. Memories of lessons learned in class rushed back as he marveled at the potential of his discovery, a chance to reignite his passion for history. Driven by this newfound treasure, Luke committed to a school project that could shine a light on the town's heritage and breathe life into fading dreams. However, familiar shadows loomed as Sarah, his childhood friend, returned from the city with grand ideas to revitalize their hometown. Her vibrant visions felt overshadowing, igniting both hope and frustration within him. Together, they were a team, but now they stood at odds. Her desire for change clashed against his loyalty to their roots. The pivotal town meeting, where futures were discussed with nervous energy, Luke could feel the heavy air wrapped around him. He prepared to unveil his findings, aching to inspire unity through the lessons of the Ice Age: unity, resilience, shared strength. As he spoke about how prehistoric communities survived by working together, the gravity of the moment sank in. This was more than just about the past, it was about bridging divides and overcoming the friction that threatened to tear them apart. The room crackled with tension, as townspeople from all walks of life listened intently, their skepticism palpable. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. In the midst of his passionate plea, an unexpected voice rose from the back, challenging his vision of unity and igniting an emotional debate that shook the room. Dread coiled in Luke's stomach. This was no longer just about his dreams, but the very soul of their town. Could he find a way to bridge the gaps, to unite a community beleaguered by division? A question hung heavy in the air as Luke pondered if he could rise above his fears. The weight of their futures rested on his shoulders, and as the discussions swirled hope, doubt, tension, Luke realized he might just have the chance to reshape not only his destiny, but the destiny of everyone he loved. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a cacophony of disbelief and resentment as the challenger pressed on. We can't just simplify our problems with tales from the past. These are real issues we're facing. A ripple of agreement followed, and Luke struggled to maintain his composure. The old walls of the meeting room felt like they were closing in, each gaze piercing through him, questioning everything he believed in. "What's your solution, then?" he shot back, his voice more defiant than he intended. "We can't forget what came before us. The Ice Age showed us how communal efforts allowed people to survive against the odds." But the doubt in the audience didn't relent. Sarah, seated nearby, caught his eye, offering a slight nod of encouragement. He needed that spark. He had to connect the dots between the struggles of their ancestors and the very real challenges they faced now. "Let me tell you something," he began again, feeling a surge of determination. Survival isn't just about individual strength. It's about collaboration. Those ancient tribes endured because they shared resources, knowledge, and support. We can do that too. It doesn't have to be one against the other. As he spoke, a sense of urgency filled the air. Faces softened, shifting from skepticism to curiosity. Luke pressed on, sharing stories from the artifacts, how each tool, each fire-scarred bone, told of people who knew the value of coming together. He painted a picture of their town, an untapped reservoir of potential, waiting to be unlocked through combined efforts. A hand shot up from the audience. It was Mrs. Thompson, the town librarian and a voice of reason. But how do we convince those who've already given up? Luke took a breath, the weight of her question heavy. Maybe by starting small. Just like the hunters of old began by sharing their catch with neighbors. Let us organize community dinners. An idea started to take root, inching into the hearts of those seated before him. Open a dialogue. Let us showcase our town to those who've left. Remind them what we're all about. Let us bring in fresh ideas from Sarah and build on our history. The room buzzed with a newfound energy, and he could see the flickers of hope, small but tenacious, beginning to emerge. He felt it too, a sense of belonging to something greater. Just as the prehistoric warriors depended on one another, perhaps their small town could unite as well. But even as he felt the tide turning, fear settled in his chest. What if they failed? What would that mean for his newly ignited passion and for Sarah's vision that now seemed within reach? The flow of ideas transformed the air, and Luke realized he wasn't just challenging the audience anymore. He was challenging himself. The notion of vulnerability surged through him like a looming shadow, dark yet undeniable. With every word, he pushed against it, but doubts clawed at the edges of his resolve. After what felt like an eternity, the meeting drew to a close, with applause and murmurs of possibilities spreading through the crowd. Yet deep down, Luke sensed a new wave of uncertainty brewing. Did they believe him? As he stepped down from the makeshift stage, Sarah approached him, her face bright with determination. That was incredible. You found a way to reach them. But there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. But we need to follow through. We can't let this be just words. He nodded. The culmination of emotions felt like a storm within him. I know, but what if no one shows up? What if the town is too far gone? Then we start with those who do, she said firmly. We can turn this tide together, but we need to act fast. The weight stirred heavy in his heart, but the idea of action sparked a new flame of courage within him. As they spoke about logistics, planning small events, Luke locked eyes with Sarah, realization dawning. This wasn't just about history. It was about hope, friendship, and the chance to change their lives for the better. But one question lingered as they brewed potential plans, the real test ahead. Would they have the strength to face the challenges that would surely arise? Just then, a loud crash echoed behind them. Tension ceased, the excitement in the air. In an instant, all eyes turned towards the sound, as worried whispers drowned out their conversation. Luke's heart raced. What now? Mysteries and challenges awaited them, and the road ahead loomed large. They had opened a door, but now they needed the courage to see where it led. Luke spun around at the sound, a mix of fear and curiosity gnawing at him. The room had frozen. The earlier optimism evaporated into uncertainty. People glanced nervously at one another, the buzz of excitement replaced by a thick tension. What was that? Someone whispered. From the back of the room, an older man with hunched shoulders stepped forward. It came from the storage room. He croaked, his voice shaky but filled with urgency. I think something fell over, or maybe someone is there. Luke's heart pounded. His mind raced with thoughts of what could be hiding behind that door. Was it just a stack of forgotten chairs? Or something deeper lurking in the shadows? Let us check it out, he said, instinctively moving closer to Sarah. We can't just ignore it. As he approached the storage area, his palms felt clammy against the cold metal doorknob. He took a deep breath, glancing over his shoulder at the crowd. Anxiety etched into their faces mirrored his own. This was about more than a simple disturbance. This was a test of courage for both him and the town that he pushed the door open, and it creaked ominously, like some warning from the past. Dust particles danced in the thin beam of light slipping through the doorway. Luke hesitated, his heart racing as the dim light unveiled a chaotic scene. Old banners, dusty boxes, and a toppled stack of chairs scattered across the floor. Just as he hoped it would end there, a sudden thud made him jump. They weren't alone. "Hello?" Sarah's voice wavered as she cautiously stepped in beside him. She was right at his side, a beacon of bravery in the surrounding uncertainty. "Is someone there?" Luke called out, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. The tension had morphed into palpable fear. What if someone truly needed help, or worse? What if it was someone they'd rather not confront? A rustling broke the suffocating silence, and Luke squinted into the dimness. Suddenly, out from behind a stack of old boxes, a scruffy dog emerged, wagging its tail furiously, seemingly ecstatic to see them. A collective sigh of relief washed over the audience who had gathered behind them, the weight of dread lifting slightly. "What in the world?" Luke chuckled, kneeling to pet the dog, which was more than happy to receive some affection. A familiar face emerged behind the dog, to the town's estranged handyman, Mr. Pardue, with his wild hair and quirky glasses, looked sheepish. "I'm sorry. I was looking for a tool and tripped over the chairs," he explained, scratching his head. "This little guy followed me in. Didn't he mean to scare anyone?" The atmosphere transformed rapidly, relief washing over the crowd and breaking the lingering tension. Luke stood back, shaking his head in disbelief, now seeing opportunity where there was once fear. "Maybe this is a sign," he said, glancing at Sarah for support. "If Mr. Pardue is here, it means we have a solid local resource who cares about our community. Why not invite him to our dinners? Everyone can help in some way, just like in the past. We can use his skills." "Absolutely." Sarah beamed, her earlier worry forgotten. "He can share stories, and we can learn from each other. This could become more than just a conversation. It could be a collaboration." Their excitement reignited. Luke turned back to the audience, feeling a spark of momentum building. "If we can bring everyone together like Mr. Pardue and this little guy, we can build something here. Something meaningful." That hope hung in the air like a sweet perfume. They had faced a challenge together, and who knew how much further they could go. But as the applause grew louder, Luke caught a glimmer of grime on the dog's leg. It was a reminder of the dust of the past they were determined to rise above. "Before we rush into planning, we must confront what has kept shaping our lives. The very issues that made us hesitate," he said, conviction in his voice. "Let us dig deeper." The crowd fell silent again, each face reflecting a mix of hope and apprehension. What other past wounds lay hidden beneath the surface? Luke felt the weight of his words. He had opened a can of worms, but maybe it was essential to face what was buried there. And as anticipation brewed, he couldn't help but ask himself, were they prepared for whatever truth might emerge next? As murmurs rippled through the crowd, Luke felt the energy shift again. People exchanged glances filled with uncertainty, as though they were standing on the edge of a precipice, each waiting for the other to take that first step into the unknown. "Dig deeper?" One voice called from the back, shaky yet curious. It belonged to a woman Luke recognized as Mrs. Jensen, the school librarian. "What do you mean by that?" Luke cleared his throat, taking a step closer to the assembled townsfolk. "We've lived here long enough to know things aren't perfect." He glanced down at the eager dog at his feet, which seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. "There are stories buried in our community, struggles we've faced alone. What if we shared those stories? What if we faced our fears together?" His heart raced as he scanned the group. This was a small town. Everyone knew someone who had felt the weight of silence and isolation. There had been whispers of feuds, families torn apart by misunderstandings, and moments when community support had faltered. Luke felt an unyielding urge to push through that barrier. Sometimes we have to confront our past to move forward. Are we ready to do that? Sarah stepped forward, aligning themselves as a united front. "We could organize an event, a night of storytelling where everyone shares something. Goods, bads, lessons learned. Could heal us." Her passion was infectious, and Luke saw nods of agreement ripple through the crowd like a wave at Mr. Pardew chimed in, his sheepish demeanor transforming into something vibrant. I've got stories that could fill a book. Stories of times when we helped each other, times we didn't tea and the lessons learned. It's all part of who we become. Hope blossomed like spring flowers battling the last traces of winter. Luke felt the weight of their shared burdens easing, a hint of possibility emerging in the corners of his mind. But then he caught that flash of uncertainty again. What about the stories no one wanted to share? What about the haunting memories that lurked behind closed doors? Suddenly, a little girl from the audience raised her hand, her voice bright yet tentative. What if someone says something sad? What do we do then? The crowd hushed. Her question hung there, heavy with the weight of honesty. Luke opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, he took a deep breath, appreciating the innocence of her inquiry. Then we listen. We create space for everyone's truth. Tears, laughter, everything. That's the only way to build something meaningful. If we don't acknowledge the sad, we can't fully celebrate the happy. Encouraged by his own words, Luke felt the energy shift again. Every one of us has faced something. We've been shaped by the trials we've endured. Tonight could mark the start of healing, of really coming together. One by one, people began nodding, murmurs of agreement rising like jazz notes floating through the air. A rekindled sense of community sparked within the room. They had a choice, to dig deeper and confront their truths or to stay quiet, stuck in the past. But as these feelings swirled, Luke couldn't shake the hint of fear himself. Were they truly ready to face what lay hidden, or would it all unravel into chaos? The tiny dog at his feet let out a bark, seemingly in response to the collective decision forming. Luke could feel the pulse of their shared conviction, but beneath that excitement lurked the anxiety of what might surface. What if the truths they unearthed opened wounds that ran deeper than expected? The echoes of the past loomed large, and Luke knew they were on the precipice of something big. Let us gather our stories. Then, he said, determination ringing in his voice, and together we'll go wherever that takes us. As they made plans for their gathering, the excitement tinged with apprehension filled the air. But deep down, Luke sensed a truth waiting to be uncovered, something that could change everything. What if the revelations of that night would reshape their community forever? The question lingered, urging them forward into the unknown. What would they discover when they turned the light on the shadows of their past? The anticipation hung thick in the air as Luke and Sarah began sketching out the framework for the storytelling night. They decided on a date, secured the community center, and even brainstormed invitations that would flutter through mailboxes like butterflies. Excitement buzzed in the crowd, a collective energy amplifying the hope that this would be the night that changed everything. Yet, as the days rolled by, a shadow of doubt crept into Luke's mind. What if the truths they uncovered were too much to bear? They might unearth wounds none of them were ready to face. He leaned against his kitchen counter, the soft light from the window framing his furrowed brow. His dog nudged him with a wet nose, grounding him to the present. Luke knew he had to prepare, not just for the stories that might inspire, but for those that might provoke tears or heartbreak. As people trickled into the community center that night, Luke could feel the tension crackle in the air. He watched familiar faces dip in and out of the dim light, each one carrying an undisclosed weight. He took a deep breath, battling his own uncertainties. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, her eyes alight with a mixture of determination and anxiety. "I think so." He wished he felt more confident. But they had talked about this, and the voices echoed in his mind like a warm embrace. They would listen to each other, provide the space people needed. When the last chair was pulled into place, Luke stepped into the center of the room, the soft hum of chatter dying down. The gathered crowd looked expectantly toward him. He raised his hand to quiet the lingering noise. "Welcome, everyone." His voice was steady, but inside, a storm brewed. "Tonight is about connection. We're here to share our stories, both the light and the shadows. It's okay to feel whatever comes up." He paused, making eye contact with several familiar faces. No one has to share if they don't want to, but we hope you will. This community is built on shared experiences. Palpable energy shifted. One by one, people began to share Mr. Pardue's laughter over a fishing trip that devolved into chaos. Mrs. Jensen's tender tale of lost love that had lingered like a bittersweet song. Each story contributed to a mosaic of their community's life, creating a magical atmosphere of vulnerability. But then, a hush fell as an older gentleman Luke recognized from the back. Mr. Hargrove stood up. His face was a roadmap of experiences, each wrinkle a story begging to be told. Luke felt the crowd lean in as Mr. Hargrove began to speak, his voice initially shaky. My son. He was lost in a tragic accident a few years ago. The room drew a breath, an avalanche of silence cascading around them. We didn't talk about it. Not even with each other. I shut everyone out. He fought back tears, but Luke could see the flood beginning. It took me too long to realize that we could supported each other. That pain, it was only mine for far too long. Luke's heart twisted. How many hearts had been weighed down like Mr. Hargrove's, holding on to sorrow that could have been shared? Others stepped forward to share their pain, stories that rippled through the room like an emotional tide. Women wept, men shared their regrets, and children sat wide-eyed, absorbing the raw truth that echoed throughout the center. As the stories flowed, Luke felt the collective hurt diminish, like flowers breaking through the concrete. They were healing, stitching together hearts with every word spoken. However, just as he thought they might find themselves together in this moment, someone cried out from the back, breaking the tender spell. What if it gets worse? The words hung in the air, heavy with fear. Luke felt his heart race. How much deeper were they willing to go? He stepped forward again. We might find things we didn't expect, but I sense that the point, to heal and to grow, together we can face whatever darkness lies beneath. But as he looked around the room, faces illuminating with both fear and hope, he couldn't shake the feeling that there were secrets lurking, ready to surface. Would they be able to handle the weight of those stories, or would fear splinter them apart once more? Luke held his breath, ready to confront what came next. What haunting truths lay buried in the hearts of their neighbors, and how would it weave the fabric of their shared future? Can you elaborate on that? Sarah's voice pierced through the tension, pulling everyone's attention back to her. Relief washed over Luke, grateful that she sensed the precariousness in the air. Sarah stepped forward, her own fear momentarily replaced by a spark of courage. We all felt pain, so why not face it head-on together? Mr. Hargrove seemed to draw strength from Sarah's words, and he continued, I never imagined talking about my grief could bring me closer to all of you. His voice cracked, the vulnerability in the phrase thickening the atmosphere. As if a dam had broken, more voices emerged. A woman named Emily, typically known for her cheerful demeanor, shared how she had grappled with depression after the loss of her mother. I wore a smile, but inside I was crumbling. Her hands trembled, but she pressed on. Talking about it now feels like shedding layers of sadness. Every word spilled forth like a salve on aching souls. Shadows, once trapped in the corners of their hearts, began to shuffle into the light. Luke could see candles flickering in the eyes around him, a fragile illumination guiding them through the darkness of shared pain. Yet, the ghost of that single unanswered question loomed. What if it gets worse? It flitted in and out of their minds, casting a layer of doubt over the emotional release. I admit, Luke started, feeling the weight of honesty settle in his chest. I'm afraid too. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. But sometimes, facing the worst is what brings us the closest together, he continued, and this time it was easier to speak. I know what it feels like to bury pain, but what if sharing it eases that load? An older woman with a pained face raised her hand. What happens if I don't feel better? What then? Luke felt the gravity of her question. The room didn't need another trauma story to contemplate. They needed hope. Then we'll be here for each other. Even when it feels heavy, we'll step into it together. It doesn't have to be a solitary journey. Silence wrapped back around the room, But this time it didn't feel like fear, it sparkled with newfound resolve. As if a switch had flipped, people began to nod, murmurs of yes and we can do this threaded through the crowd. I in the distance. The murmurs began to rise again as more people stepped forward to share, tales of loss mingling with moments of unexpected joy. A young man spoke about grappling with addiction. A mother spoke of the pride she felt in watching her daughter overcome the challenges of life after disability. It was a patchwork of stories, each piece stunning and unique as laughter began to trickle in alongside the tears. Luke realized something monumental was happening. They weren't just sharing burdens. They were knitting bonds. The fear that had shrouded the night began to transform into a vibrant tapestry of connection. Then, just as the energy surged, a voice called from near the back, shattering the newly woven warmth. What if we lose someone else? Luke's heart dropped. The question smacked against their hopeful momentum like cold water splashed against skin on a sweltering day. He locked eyes with Sarah, who stood frozen, her brows knitted in worry. What if? Indeed. Her voice barely registered over the collective silence. The dread creeping back into the space felt palpable. Would the stories they shared evoke more pain than healing? For every person who stepped forward tonight, there was a world of uncertainty waiting to be navigated. Luke took a step forward, feeling the weight of choice and consequence. Tonight is only the beginning, he stated, each word weighty. This will take time. But we'll walk this journey together. One story, one heart at a time. People shifted nervously, whispering encouragements and military-like pledge to bond together in the face of fears. Yet Luke sensed a trickling doubt. Were they truly prepared for the emotional frontier awaiting them? As the night progressed, a sense of unity began to settle, but he knew it was only a sliver of what truly lay ahead. Luke felt his insides churn, wrestling with the relentless question. Would the revelations mix with agony, or would they weave a stronger community fabric? They were on the brink of facing something imperative, aching to break free into the sunlight. With emotions on the rise, he wondered what voices would emerge next. Who would dare to shed the last layers of restraint? Would they remain united, or would fear lead them into darkness shaped by unanswered questions? He held on tightly to hope, wondering, as the evening continued, how far they would stretch beyond their comfort zones. Would they find more profound truths, or merely unearth hidden resentments that could splinter their newfound bonds apart? As the minutes passed, an unsteady rhythm filled the room, punctuated by quiet reflections and the occasional sniffle. Luke stood in the center, feeling the warmth generated by shared vulnerability, yet a chill gripped the edges of his spirit. The lingering fear clung tightly, reminding everyone of the harsh realities that still existed outside these walls. Then, a familiar voice broke through the stillness. "I'm Mark," he said, his tone uncharacteristically serious as he rose from his seat. "I lost my brother last year." The announcement hung heavily in the air, and everyone leaned in, hearts racing with anticipation. "I thought I knew grief, until I had to face it without him. I wanted to scream, but instead I shut down." Mark's eyes glistened as he spoke, vulnerability spilling out with each word. "I lost not just my brother but also a part of myself." With each confession, his body looked smaller, as though the weight of his sorrow had shrunk him down. Luke felt the room shift, an electric charge of empathy igniting as others began to nod in understanding. "I missed more than just the person. I missed all the memories we were supposed to create." Mark's face twisted in pain. "Like celebrating his wedding, or laughing about the silly things we did as kids. I kept it all inside." He paused, drawing in a shaky breath. "But last week, I found a crazy old picture of us and I smiled for the first time in a long time. That's when it hit me, maybe I've been holding on to the pain instead of allowing myself to remember the joy." A ripple of soft murmurs traveled through the group, resonating deeply. With tender smiles, people exchanged glances. They recognized that this was a moment of transformation. Hope was flickering, a fragile flame that might grow stronger with the kindling of shared stories. Celebrating the memories. "It feels wrong sometimes, doesn't it?" Someone whispered from the back, a voice tinged with disbelief. Luke nodded empathetically. feels like betrayal, he agreed, but remembering is part of healing. It's not forgetting but honoring all they meant to us. Mark straightened, the weight on his shoulders seeming to lessen. I guess it's about finding balance. I can feel sad and grateful at the same time. Sarah stepped forward, her voice warm and encouraging. Let us carry that forward, shall we? What if we shared not just the pain but the joy too? We can create a space to celebrate life while we mourn our losses. A collective nod of agreement filled the room as minds stirred with the idea. Memories of laughter mingled with sorrow, weaving an intricate pattern of healing. Everyone began to share snippets of joy, laughter-filled holidays, silly inside jokes. Each story seemed to lift the weight of sorrow just a little, like ice cracking in the sun. Out of the corner of his eye, Luke noticed Mr. Hargrove, who sat quietly, a small smile easing his weary face. Luke felt a flicker of triumph. Each confession was a thread, binding them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Just then, a new voice erupted into the conversation. What about regrets? It was a woman's voice, shaking yet determined. The bustling reverie dropped to a hush as everyone turned toward her. What do we do about the things left unsaid? The apologies that should have happened? The question hung in the air, not unlike a rain cloud ready to burst. Luke's heart raced. She had opened another door. Would this lead them deeper, or would it drown their newfound connections beneath layers of guilt? He found himself wondering what stories would come to light. Would there be more fear, or more courage to share? As thoughts swirled, Luke closed his eyes, imagining the community wrapped together, finally free to express their emotions. The next chapter of their journey loomed ahead, uncharted territory filled with both promise and uncertainty. Would they brave revealing not just their sorrows but the haunting regrets they held so tightly? Luke took a deep breath, feeling anticipation swirl within him as the night stretched onward. Mark shifted in his seat, the weight of regret reflected in his eyes. Regrets can feel heavy, can't they? His voice was steadying, trying to gather the courage to dig even deeper. The room punctuated his words with nods. People leaned forward, waiting for something profound to emerge. I always wished I had told my brother how much he meant to me. There were so many times I thought, I'll say it tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. His voice wavered, and he clenched his fists tightly in his lap. Now I carry that silence like a stone. It was as if everyone collectively exhaled, the tension easing a bit as they recognized shared pain. Luke shifted uncomfortably, the chill creeping back into his heart. He too had unspoken words, things he struggled to say but wanted everyone to understand. The thought of opportunity lost flickered like an old film reel in his mind. I should have told my dad I loved him. I thought he knew. A man murmured from the back, his gaze distant as if searching for something he couldn't grasp. But I never wanted to seem weak or sentimental. The pain in his voice was palpable. Luke glanced around the room, catching the eyes of others who wore similar expressions of shared vulnerability. This was more than just a group talking, it was a gathering of fractured hearts reaching out for connection. What if we turned it around? Sarah, whose warmth radiated even in the fragile atmosphere, spoke softly. What if we shared not just what we regret, but also what we wish we had said? Maybe even apologize here and now, to those we've lost? There was a murmur of agreement, like waves bustling against the shore, hesitantly at first but gaining momentum. Luke felt the air shift, the palpable energy filling up with possibilities instead of pain. This heavy moment could transform into something powerful. One by one, voices rose. I'm sorry I never asked if you were okay, a woman said, her tears slipping down her cheeks. I thought you'd figure it all out on your own. I'm sorry that I was too wrapped up in my own life to notice how much you struggled. Another chimed in. There were gasps and sniffles amid the words of remorse, but each apology seemed like a soft bandage on deep wounds. Luke's heart pounded. His throat constricted as he contemplated what he wanted to say. Memories flooded him, his own battle with unspoken emotions, missed chances. But could he face his regrets? Could he kneel down and dig into that vulnerable place? He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of support surrounding him. I wish I had been there for all of you," he finally said, his voice breaking. "I know what it's like to feel alone in grief. I just want you all to know I'm here. And I'm sorry if I ever made anyone feel like they were alone." There was a stillness, charged with emotion, as his words hung in the air. Felt like an unshackling. Others began to respond, sharing their own heartfelt apologies and admissions of missteps. With each confession, the chains of regret began to loosen, freeing them all as the session continued. The air shifted from darkness to light. The stories transformed, evolving from sorrow to an understanding that regrets don't have to bind them down. They can serve as fuel for growth, lessons learned in the fires of pain. But just as the laughter started to rise, and a hesitant warmth filled the space, another thought crashed over them. The bigger regrets lay ahead. Luke glanced over at the woman who asked the question that started this all. She seemed lost in thought, and he wondered what darkness still lingered in her heart. What did she carry that still held her back? Would her story bring them all crashing down, or could it become another thread in their growing tapestry of healing? With anticipation brewing, Luke wondered just how deep the conversations would go. What other untold stories lingered, waiting to be shared? The atmosphere in the room shifted again as Luke's gaze lingered on Sarah, whose soft smile was now tinged with a hint of sadness. The air hummed with unspoken stories, and he could sense everyone holding their breath, waiting for her to reveal the weight she carried. After a moment, Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared." Everyone leaned in. In this intimate circle, vulnerability was met with a profound respect. "I'm scared of what I've never said," she continued, her eyes glistening. "I've held back so much because of fear. I lost my sister last year, and I never told her how much I loved her. I never indicated just how much she mattered in my life." Luke's heart sank. He could see the raw pain etched in her features. He remembered the quiet obsessions of his own mind, the shadows that lurked after losing someone. "What if I had said something different?" she asked, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "What if I had said how proud I was of her, how brave I thought she was? Would she still be here?" A heavy silence enveloped the room. People sat frozen, emotions thrumming in the air like a fleeting melody, beginning to swell into a collective understanding. They were all trapped in the what-ifs, and it was suffocating. Mark cleared his throat, his own vulnerability emerging anew. "Sarah, I can't pretend to know what you're feeling, but I do know that holding that weight isn't fair to you." His voice gained strength. "You wouldn't want your sister to carry that burden in the afterlife, would you? What if, instead, you let that love wrap around you, reminding you of the warmth she brought?" Luke nodded slowly, feeling a flame spark inside him. It was a revelation, a way to keep the lost loved ones alive. He silently willed Sarah to embrace that freedom, to allow the memories to be her strength, not her weakness. "I never thought of it like that," she said between sobs. "I thought being sad was my way of remembering her. But maybe I can remember through joy instead." The air shifted once more, a blend of hope and healing beginning to weave through the raw edges of grief. Several others began to speak again, sharing their own burdens and contemplating ways to honor their loved ones beyond regret. Some spoke of finding small ways to carry on traditions, making them feel like their loved ones were still part of their lives. Even with this catharsis unfolding, Luke felt a knot tightening in his chest. They were unraveling layers of pain, but he sensed there was still a deep-rooted secret lurking just beneath the surface, intensely personal yet collectively significant. Who else had something hidden that could either shatter or strengthen this fragile moment? As the sharing continued, Luke felt a pulse of urgency rising within him. He needed to dive deeper, to peel back layers of silence and ask the uncomfortable questions that lay in their hearts. What were they not saying? What truths were still locked away in fear? He glanced around, hopeful and anxious. Every face reflected a story, perhaps one that could bring them further into this unexpected journey of healing. What if, he thought, his heart pounding with both excitement and dread, we stripped away the layers completely? What's the one thing we need to say not just to each other, but to ourselves? He leaned forward. What's the one truth that would free us? The questions lingered between them, inviting them all to open up wider. Would they have the courage? Would they be ready to embrace the story waiting just beneath the surface? The one that would challenge everything they thought they knew. With their hearts beating loudly in synchronicity, they leaned closer once more. This wasn't just a group. It was a community, a family searching for healing together, bracing for the revelations that could change everything. As the clock ticked on, the air thick with anticipation, Luke could feel the emotional tide shifting in the room. People were unraveling, and their shared stories were igniting sparks of hope. But beneath that energy, a current of fear rippled. How much further can we go? He thought, glancing across the gathered faces. He felt an unmistakable urgency to uncover what lay beneath the surface. The warmth from shared laughter and tears created a sanctuary where people felt valued. Let us push ourselves a little more, he urged, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his stomach. Let us strip away the layers and speak our deepest truths. As the challenge hung in the air, silence filled the community center. Every glance exchanged emphasized connection. Yet unease ebbed and flowed like waves crashing against the shore. Then Mr. Hargrove rose again, his hands shaking slightly. We're tied to our regrets, but what if we allow forgiveness? He offered, vulnerability coating his words like a soft embrace. The room buzzed with curiosity, the weight of his question resonating deeply. Forgiving ourselves, Luke echoed, leaning into the thought. It's easy to live with blame, but letting go can lighten our hearts. As if ignited by the idea, voices began to rise from all corners. I forgive myself for holding on too tightly, for not stepping up sooner, a woman said, her voice breaking but resolute. I struggled with the pain, feeling like I was a burden, but I now know I can't define myself by my past mistakes. Another chimed in, a cathartic release glistening in her eyes with every confession. A chain lifted, and Luke felt the collective weight lighten. Forgiveness doesn't erase the hurt we're not forgetting, but it sets us free, he reiterated, his heart swelling with pride. The tension from earlier gave way like a soft breeze through the trees, and smiles began to emerge, nudging those feeling uncertain back to the circle. Sarah couldn't hold back the warmth in her voice. What would we say if we forgive if we really let go? Is it just the words? Or is there something deeper? Her eyes glowed with curiosity. One by one, stories began to flow anew, sharing lessons learned in the trenches of life, each layered experience illuminating another's path. When I lost my sister, I didn't think I could ever forgive, but I realized she wouldn't want that for me. Another voice ventured softly. Suddenly, the room held collective breaths, the bond of grief transforming into something powerful and palpable. Luke relished the tears springing from the eyes of those around him. It was a cleansing, an acknowledgement that healing requires facing deep pain. Then came that little girl's voice again, sweet yet firm. I think we can forgive ourselves for being sad, too. A teasing laugh broke the heaviness, reconnecting everyone to that innocent spark. Yes, that's a big one, Luke exclaimed, his heart dancing at her insight as if igniting a fire. Other voices turned stronger. I forgive myself for not knowing better, someone said boldly. Another face joined in. I forgive myself for allowing fear to rule my choices for so long. A wave of fervor swept through the room. Each sentiment felt like a stepping stone leading deeper, breaking barriers and stitching wounds. With renewed energy swirling around them, Luke urged the group to keep going, urging them to climb further into the depths of their own narratives. How do we rise from our challenges? What lessons guide us forward? The answers sang in harmony, a symphony of revelation echoing through familiar hearts. Community is strength, Sarah injected, her voice ringing like a bell. Luke nodded, buoyed by the spark of an idea that began to take shape. Let us turn these stories into actions, a guidebook for healing and hope, driven by compassion. We can plant seeds for others to heal just like we have tonight. With every moment that passed, the room became electric. Every shared piece of bravery rekindled old wounds but wove an intricate tapestry of resilience, pride rising within him. They transformed that shadow of fear into light as laughter and forgiveness joined arms. Luke found freedom in community. Joy became their anthem. Each story shared lightened their burdens, and gradually, doubts gave way to faith in the communal embrace of honesty. Past hurts no longer held them captive. Instead, they ventured into rebirth, each person stepping out of the lingering darkness that sought to define them. I believe in us, I believe in this town, Luke said, his voice rising to meet the emotions swirling in the room. The warmth of collective strength surged around him, wrapping tightly like a blanket. As the meeting came to an end, Luke felt that the town had rallied together in unprecedented ways. This was not just about tackling memories, this was revival. Tonight marked the beginning of a beautiful journey, and with that spark ignited in their hearts, they would become a flowing river of change, healing, and unity. They would take the stories shared, turning them into action like so many ancient tribes had before. A new chapter awaited, one bursting with possibilities. They were not just a community. They now became a family bound by shared hopes, dreams, grief, and love. And as they left, Luke felt that they would continue to rise together, step by step, wielding the legacy of their ancestors, the true essence of what it meant to be human. Now it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories shedding light on transformations. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and push our community farther. For every click counts. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about the ending. Your voice matters in our journey together. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. They deserve to view the power of connection and healing. Don't wait not even one more second to share. True fans understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.